Welcome to our weekly 3-minute therapy podcast. I'm Dr. Michael Edelstein. I'm a clinical psychologist and author of the book 3-Minute Therapy. And I'm here with my regular co-host, Mick Berry, who also is an REBT expert. REBT is Rational Emotive Behavior Therapy, which is a type of therapy devised by Albert Ellis in the mid-50s that caused a revolution in psychotherapy. And REBT says that our emotions and behaviors don't come from situations themselves, but rather come from our thinking about situations. So that was the basic idea that Albert Ellis popularized. And when we have disturbed emotions such as anxiety, stress, depression, anger, or self-defeating behaviors such as procrastination and addiction, it comes from a particular type of irrational thinking, thinking in terms of must. And there are three main musts or demands. I must do well and get approval, or else I'm no good. Others must treat me well, or else they're no good. And my life must go well, or else my life is awful, terrible, and horrible. So when you have emotional disturbance or behavioral self-defeating behaviors, look for your must, look for your should, and uproot your musts and shoulds. Mick, did you want to add anything to that?
No, I think that covers it.
Okay, and today we're going to be discussing rational emotive behavior therapy and remorse. So let's start with a definition. Remorse normally is deep regret or guilt about a wrong committed. Um, and when you feel remorse, you could feel rational or appropriate remorse or irrational or inappropriate remorse. And when it's inappropriate, when you're blaming yourself for mistakes, it comes from some must, such as I must never make mistakes. I must always act perfectly. It's terrible. I made this mistake. I must undo my past actions. I must be forgiven by others. Mick, do you want to add any to that?
Uh, no, it sounds good.
Okay, good. Now, so if you have inappropriate maladaptive remorse, it means it comes from one of those musts. So what you can do to get over that is not get over your feeling sorry or regretful about your mistake, but rather feeling guilty about it. The thing to do is to identify, then question, challenge, and contradict your musts and show yourself. For example, although it would be highly desirable, highly preferable, lovely and wonderful never to make mistakes, but you're not a bad person if you do. And although it would be desirable to act perfectly all the time, you're just an imperfect human who acts imperfectly. No reason why you have to act perfectly all the time. That doesn't make sense. And it's never terrible, awful, or horrible to make mistakes. At worst, what happens when you make mistakes is you have disadvantages, not terrors or horrors. And although you might have this tendency to think, only if I could go back and undo what I did, which comes from I must undo my past actions, uh, there's no reason why you have to. And of course, you can't. Mick?
Well, I was going to say if we call remorse, if we define it as a deep regret connected to guilt, you said if you have inappropriate remorse, by that definition, isn't all remorse inappropriate?
No, it's not inappropriate if you just have regret for what you did. And some of the advantages of that it could be a catalyst for personal growth. You could learn from your mistakes. It could help you be more aware of what you're doing and avoid mistakes. It could promote empathy for how other people are feeling if you regret and think back what you did and its effect on others. And you could apologize, make reparations, restitution to others for mistakes that may have impacted them. Yes, Mick?
Yeah, but we defined it as deep regret connected to guilt. And I don't think guilt is rational. So if we're defining it as connected to guilt, it doesn't seem to me that remorse can ever be rational.
I see. That's a good point, but I think that guilt could also be appropriate or inappropriate. Guilt could mean taking responsibility for bad action. That would be appropriate guilt. Or guilt could mean you're blaming yourself. I'm a bad person. I took responsibility and I'm a bad person for having done that. So those are two different types of guilt. Actually, there's another type of guilt, and that's the legal sense of guilt, which is that you are guilty or you are responsible for what you did. And then the court or the law penalizes you in some way for that.
Well, the most common way I hear guilt used is that somebody thinks about a particular behavior as something they should not have done.
Yeah, and what do you see as a remedy for that?
Well, obviously, the remedy for that would be in REBT terms to realize that you're a fallible human being, and unfortunately, you do things sometimes that are not good and that could be detrimental to yourself and other people, and to be aware of that. And if you have already done something that's in that category, to not beat yourself up about it and not say I should not have done it, but to recognize, gee, I'm a fallible human being. It's best for me to be on my guard to not do this behavior again, and to be aware that I'm capable of committing other things, of doing other things that might be detrimental to myself and other people.
Yeah, I agree with that. And beating yourself up about it never makes any sense because it means you're a bad person, you're a rotten person, and often deserve to be punished for your bad acts. But you're never a rotten person. You could act rottenly, but at worst, you're a human being, an imperfect person who always and only acts bad, not always, but can act badly and always and only as an imperfect human. And you can unconditionally accept yourself as being an imperfect human. Mick?
Well, I was going to say, to clarify, beating yourself up, that's a very general and vague term. Actually, it's used all the time by people. But what we mean as practitioners of REBT by beating yourself up is putting yourself down, considering yourself less of a person, considering yourself not worthy to be alive, thinking that you are inferior and that you are plagued with being less than other people on a continuing basis, rather than self acceptance, which is accepting ourself, including our fallibility.
That's right. Yes. Okay, that's all I wanted to say about REBT and remorse. Did you want to add anything else, Mick?
I'm sure there's something more I can add. Well, it seems to me remorse is connected to anything we're doing, that whenever we're putting ourselves down, we have remorse. Wouldn't you say that?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yes, that's one
Yeah.
thing.
So I'm curious why we chose the topic REBT and remorse. Haven't we been doing that all along?
We haven't discussed, I don't think we've discussed remorse before.
Well, what I'm saying though is, if whenever you put yourself down, it's remorse. We haven't named it remorse, but we've been talking about remorse all the time when we talk about putting yourself down.
Yeah. That's true. So I think would be good to name it, and I don't think
That's,
we've named it in the past.
yeah, it's not a bad thing. Yeah, to name it, you could also call it REBT and doing yourself in, or REBT and beating yourself up, or REBT and self defeat.
Right. Yeah. So those could be topics
Yeah.
for um, future podcasts.
Here-
And also that,
yeah,
as we say, it's always good to reinforce these ideas and practice a new way of looking at things. So I think that's useful for repetition. Yeah, Mick?
yeah, I was going to say that the thing about remorse and the thing about which is putting yourself down or beating yourself up is kind of funny. Putting yourself down, beating yourself up, down, up. Anyway, two words that can mean the exact opposite words that mean the same thing. Um, it is an incredibly human experience to do that throughout the world over. And I think it's safe to say that every human being has experienced it who is alive right now and who has ever lived. Being self defeating is endemic to being a human being. Now, I suppose there are some people that don't put themselves down and they say it's the fault of others or the fault of the world constantly, and they would never recognize themselves as committing a wrong. And I think one of the reasons I've noticed, one of the reasons of people that fall into that category think that they never make mistakes, it's because they have a bad tendency to, if they do make a mistake, then they will put themselves down severely. So rather than put themselves down severely, they just will not make the mistake. This is one of the big advantages to REBT. When you become skilled at not putting yourself down, then you can more easily recognize your mistakes and more easily avoid your mistakes because you are attentive to the awareness that you could make a mistake and you're not afraid to make a mistake. You don't want to make a mistake, but you can then be more aware what the mistake is and more readily admit to the mistake and correct the mistake because you don't waste any time, which no good ever comes from putting yourself down, beating yourself up, calling yourself a lousy individual. That's all wasted effort rather than attending to fixing the mistake or avoiding the mistake in the first place.
Yeah, very good. Okay, anything else before we wrap it up?
I think that's it.
Very good. So thanks, Mick, for being my rational co-host. And I'd like to thank Chris Rossini, our tech engineer. Comment below if you have thoughts about what we discussed or questions. Give us a like, a thumbs up if you gained from this. Suggest subjects for a future podcast and volunteer. We have a volunteer coming up in a few weeks, so you can also volunteer if you'd like to discuss a problem or discuss some of the theory and practice that we discuss. And subscribe to the 3 Minute Therapy podcast to do what, Mick?
To stay on the rational side of life, which includes the remorseless side of life.